anything at the front door. So, and maybe those are completely, well, I didn't really tell anyone I was leaving, so.
I know. I like it when you do that because then I can tell people. I told the worship team that you're abandoning us for the Great White North.
That's right. I'm done. I'm leaving you to your own demise. Oh, man. So are you leading this morning? Who's? Yeah.
All three. You're gonna earn my check for once.
There you go. So good morning, Tim. It's good to see you.
Are you staring at him? Is he there in the room?
No. His bride banned him to the back room, so he didn't. His comments didn't come through. Oh, so.
That's
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff's running around here somewhere.
I guess he doesn't understand what, now that he's retired, he doesn't understand what deadlines and schedules mean.
Yeah, he'll just come on when it's convenient.
Yeah, I'll get to it. Oh, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Clarence. How are things in Tennessee this morning? I know there were some storms that kind of rolled through here yesterday. I don't know if they went all the way to Tennessee.
So we'll have Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. We're taking over the South.
That's right. We're internationally, or an international ministry only in the United States.
Who was it at the Ministers Fellowship that said they had somebody from Africa watching the broadcast?
Oh yeah, that Micah.
Yeah, it's crazy. We've had people from internationally, haven't we, over the years?
Yeah. You like my? I'm hoping to steal one of these.
Those look awesome. It's like one of those camp kind of mugs.
Yeah, it is.
It looks like you can fit nice 20 ounces of coffee in there.
I mean, that is nice. I'm
still gonna make my coffee.
So
I'll be cranky.
So who else is with us this morning? You guys go ahead and check in, so we make sure to get you the star for Sunday school.
And we need to know if the FBI or the NSA is watching this. So identify yourselves. Identify yourselves.
Or Putin, he gets to be czar for the rest of his life. So
yeah,
good on him. Now, I think the Russians interfered with the Russian election, though.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I think Putin. Oh yeah. Oh. I love how, or I don't love. Love is the wrong word. It is crazy or ironic how this one dude can just basically make himself dictator, in today's world. It's just insane.
Well, it's like Ping did over in China.
Yeah,
I can't believe someone hasn't whacked him. I mean, but they haven't. So, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Glad that you're with us this morning. There's Tanya from the Fellowship Hall.
There he is.
Hey.
Good morning. You like
this
around?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, if that chair fits, baby.
Hey,
it's available.
I'm just popping around.
Man,
chair.
That angle makes me look like I have a lot of books.
You do. I have a confession. So I'm sitting here. I'm hearing Josh talking. I figured he's just, taking care of business. No, just taking care of business.
Yeah, just prattling.
So I'm on the worship center stream, for the worship service instead of this one. So I'm just sitting here waiting,
You're in the wrong studio.
Because I saw you talking to the praise team earlier, and I was thinking, they must have problems or something because we haven't started. We haven't gone live yet. So
Jeff looks down and goes, "These guys not understand schedules or nothing."
I know it.
Back when I was in the corporate world, 9 o'clock meant 9 o'clock.
We were wondering what had happened to you.
Well,
I was giving you the business of, well, now that I'm retired, I don't know what schedules mean,
I'm going to revert back to Jamaica time. So,
yeah, well,
that's how it works.
There's worse things. Well, I hope everyone in your family's doing okay. I kept looking for clues because I knew the intent was for you to go be with family.
Yes.
And then I saw your bride get her hair cut, and I thought, oh, well, they were there and it was hot and she finally gave in and did it. And so,
no, they're recovering. So it's good. So,
okay, good deal.
Appreciate the thoughts and prayers. I think they're on maybe the recovery side of it. So we'll see, but appreciate the prayers for sure.
Sure.
And then of course, I think you saw, we posted for Micah's grandfather.
I'm going to reach out to them. I have very good access last evening, so the accommodations up here, they're really starting to knock their stars off the top. I had to take a Mountain Dew shower this morning. You know what that is, don't you? Cold
shower, yeah.
Cold.
And, see, I was thinking the actual drink Mountain Dew. I was about to say I don't think that'll clean you off very well.
No, but no, it's fun stuff. So yeah, I need to reach out to them and I pray for them, and just crazy days. So,
well, this is a bonus. I didn't think we were going to see you this morning, so here I am, pleasantly surprised, even though I'm late. So
that he can't.
Hey, that's right.
He can't go away. He's got to check in on his baby.
I got to sit in an audience this morning and listen to some other hack. So. No, in all honesty, though, Heath Kirkpatrick, I'm going to the Woodlands here in Harrison. He's one of my favorite preachers. He's good. So he better bring it. That's all I'm saying. Last time I was up, he was out of town.
Tell me you're in town, then he better, bring that A sermon. If he's got a B one, shelve that one, bring something else out there. That's right.
Don't pawn that off on someone else. You better bring your best one. Something I can steal. So that'll be interesting.
Have you ever thought that you had a B or C sermon, Jimmy, and then it turned out from the response that it was an A sermon?
Oh, yeah. Now, that's a far better experience than thinking you have an A sermon and it ends up being like a C or D response.
Right.
When you think you're killing it and you walk away and you go, that was terrible. So, yeah.
All your jokes falling flat. You can't remember your illustrations. Yeah.
And I've had at least once comes to memory. It may have happened twice where the car just slips completely out of gear.
Yeah.
And this was back at the old building. I don't remember when I was teaching, but I said, well, we can do one of two things. Because your notes just look like chicken scratch. You're like, well, I don't even know what this means anymore. So we just prayed and went home. Just never mind.
Hey, that's better than sometimes trying to get through it. I mean, there's been times where I look around and I'm like, I've still got either, especially early on, it's like 15 minutes are up and you run through all your material and you go, okay, what do I do? Or the opposite where you're like, oh no, I've been going for, 30 plus minutes. I still have like half my notes. I've already put Scott to sleep. I've already put Zane to sleep. I've already put, what am I going to do? Like, pretty soon, there's not going to be anybody awake in this building.
I spent the first 20 minutes just referring to the first 5 messages of this series. Yeah. That's one of my pitfalls because I always want to go back and reinforce.
Right.
And the next thing you know, I'm getting cued. And I'm like, oh, I've still got the new material to teach.
So do you guys ever, when you preach, do you say, I wish I would have said this, I wish I would have said that?
Every time.
But fortunately, the feeling of I wish I had not said that is far less than it used to be.
Yeah.
But I still.
Jimmy hasn't let any expletives slip yet.
Oh.
In a while, for a while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the curse jar is empty. It's nice. There's a guy on the internet. If you go Google him, he's called is the cussing pastor.
Oh no!
And he believes that God wants him to use profanity. He says it's more street, it's more authentic and stuff. And I'm like, I just think you like to cuss.
I think we'd all be better served if we didn't bring the street into the church, but we took the church into the street.
Yeah, it's kind of supposed to be a one-way street.
Jimmy's already furiously writing it down.
Yeah, that's right. The church is a one-way street. Yes. Yeah. So, but oh goodness.
There's Georgia. Oh yeah, mom and dad are with Caleb.
Oh, that's right. Good morning, all the slinkards in Georgia.
I got an amen for Sylvia. I'm out.
There you go.
There we go.
Hey, good morning, James.
Miss Sylvia.
Good morning, Miss Sylvia. our recitation of the model prayer. Appreciate that the other day. I hope her leg's I hope she's at least comfortable, her knee and stuff. So she came in and, she was hurting, and I said, hey, you need to get a different bit. Someone with a hurting leg's already taken.
So I have a question. Did you reset the air conditioner in your office because it's hot in here? Or you always enduring this?
I'm always
no. Hold on.
No.
Hold on, I got you.
He's got to take care of me with his phone. Look at that.
And me too. Yeah, I've got lights on me and everything. If you're hot, if Jeff is hot, Josh is hot. That is a for sure thing.
Come on, Pastor, give us a little air, even though you're not here. Right. He's got everything cranked up to 80.
Yeah, that's right.
He wants some sweat in there. Yeah, under all these bright lights. I will tell you though.
I just don't want everyone to get too comfortable.
Thank you, sir.
Thank the Lord for LEDs though, because man, put them. Even in my house, switching the 100 lights, whatever it is, from the incandescent or whatever to LEDs, they're more expensive, but the heat that is saved. Oh my goodness! There's one table where I couldn't even sit under it. It was so hot when all the lights were on, and now you just put LED bulbs in there, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah.
There it is.
I heard it crank on. Thank you,
there you go.
All the way from Arkansas.
It's magic. Don't mind the man behind the curtain. On the drive up, I was thinking about all those years coming up with the boys, and man, some incredibly wonderful memories. I'm purposing to send them some notes just to thank them for their ministry and just being a part of some incredible, wonderful memories of the band and the boys from Texas and Cody and oh geez, I just
you might have to have a band, Arkansas band reunion or something. And
I don't know if I can afford them. Yeah, used to they'd work, for food, but
yeah,
that would be a pretty incredible thing.
It'd be Jacob and Colin and Kevin, and
you have to get Austin.
Jacob, Colin,
Austin,
Kevin,
come. Yeah,
Austin, Cody, for whatever
play the triangle or
I don't know if he ever played.
He,
to manage.
And then Trey, Trey always ran the laptop.
Ran laptop. That's right.
And I brought Patrick would come with us. Patrick was just, kind of the gopher, and man, we'd load that van up, and oh gosh, good times.
That's right, brother Tim. I am full of ideas, and I'm going to be. There we go. See, Tim likes it.
Tim always likes the idea of bringing back the history. So now I'll tell on Tim. Now, Josh, you asked, have you ever taught something that you didn't know was going to be? Well, one year I taught a themed message on chasing the lion, and I thought it was good. Obviously, I took the time to teach it, but it was one of those that God goes, okay, I'm going to do something really unique and special with this. And so it's funny because Tim's all the time, he's always, well, you can teach that again. And I'm like, well, but there's no guarantee. I mean, God did something very unexpected, and but it was good, chasing the lion. So Tim likes that.
That's good. That's a good perspective to have instead of every time he says that going, well, I've got other good stuff. That's not the only good sermon I've ever preached in my life.
Or hey, you can teach anything you want, just don't teach this again.
Yeah.
And then you get the comeback that says, no, actually you don't. Keep teaching that one.
That's right. You can teach anything you want as long as it's that. So
yeah.
So over the next 4 days, I'd speak tonight, and then I'll speak twice on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think I got bumped from Thursday morning. So I don't know, how I justify even being here. But
since you're only doing 7 instead of 8.
Yeah. So I'm only teaching 7 sessions, but so it'll be good. It's going to be good. And get Thursdays dedicated to hanging out, and I think a visit up to Branson may be in place. We'll see. So if it's open,
yeah,
I don't know. I think they may have closed Missouri. I don't know.
It's the entire state.
We don't have any quarantine issues getting back in the state of Texas, do we? So you may have to stay there.
I don't think so.
You may.
Yeah. It was funny. I stopped right at this in Texarkana, and they had placards on all the gas pumps telling everyone, "Hey, in Texas, you better mask up."
Oh wow!
Because Arkansas doesn't have the mandate, so
yeah.
But yeah. So,
all right, you guys get off this feed. Let me teach these people.
All right. Well, now I'm not. I don't think I'll be here for the backside. We'll see.
Oh no. Okay. Well, then we will give you the floor. Say your piece.
Well, hey, let me just say this. One is I appreciate being a part of a church that sees kingdom work as important work. I've served with men who would have had to take personal time off to make themselves available to something like this. So I appreciate that tremendously. And I appreciate, a family, my bride in particular, who's always supported. And this will be coming up if I can, kind of dump you into a next segment. This week's Mint Mask is going to have a special reflection on true friendship. One of the great things about true friendship is you can be apart for any length of time, but when you come back together, it's like you never left.
Right.
That is what family and friendship really looks like. And that's what it's like here for me. So love you guys. Thank you. I know there was a time when Jeff was all by himself. He was so alone. And, but to be able to answer the invitation, knowing that the ministry at ALF is carried at a very high level is a blessing to me. So I hope everyone will tune in and show up, and look forward to a great message. And I see Nate knows I'm here now. So, but anyway, so I will see you guys. Now, I will also say this. It is my intention to be here Tuesday night for Systematic Theology, because we're going to be talking about sin. That's one of my favorite subjects.
He's got some experience.
So, I was a practicing sinner, so, but I love you guys. I hope you have a great day.
Love you too.
And I'll be in touch. Thank you guys.
All right.
Love you.
Love you, Jimmy. Bye, Jimmy.
All right. See you on the backside, Josh.
All right, sir. All right. So we're going to start our lesson today. We're going to be in Judges chapter 6. So if you want to go ahead and turn there, we'll be in Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 11. So Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 11. We'll go ahead and turn there too. It might be a familiar story to you, but it might not be. And I think it's always good to go to the Old Testament. And I'm preaching for the New Testament this morning, so I thought I'd do a lesson in the Old Testament. So we're in Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 11. And before we get into the verses, I want to give just a little bit of context about what's going on. So when we get to this point in Judges chapter 6, the Israelites have started to worship other gods. They started to worship the Canaanite gods, specifically Baal and Asherah, which are going to come up in this story. And since they've decided to worship these other gods, God removed his hand of protection from them. And he allowed the Midianites and the Amalekites and people from the east to attack them. And it's kind of a misnomer sometimes in the Old Testament. God sometimes has a reputation as being somehow very vindictive or something. But when you look at God's punishments in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament as well, because he is the same today, yesterday, and forever. But if you look at the punishments in the Old Testament, many times it's merely God removing his hand of protection. So he says, worship me, don't worship these other gods, and they start to worship these other gods. So he says, okay, well, let those gods save you, let those gods protect you from Babylon or from Egypt or from the Midianites. And obviously these gods can't. So they worship these old Canaanite gods. God has removed his hand of protection. These people have attacked them. And then as happens, they've cried out to the Lord, and he sends a prophet that tells them that God's going to rescue them out from the hand of Egypt and the Midianites and these people who've attacked them, and from the people who lived in the promised land. And he's told them, the prophet has reminded them that God rescued them out of Egypt, that he rescued them from the people who lived in the promised land originally, that he's given the promised land to them, and that he's told them not to worship the gods of the land, but they didn't worship. They didn't listen, and they worshiped them anyway. So this prophet is basically explaining to the people, this is why this has happened. God can save you from all these people. God can rescue you. But the reason that you're in this situation is because you disobeyed him, is because you started worshiping these other gods. So we're going to get into the text now, Judges chapter 6, verse 11. And it begins in verse 11, I'm going to read out of the Net translation. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak tree in Ophrah, owned by Joash the, I'm going to mess this up, Abiezrite, which he's he's part of the tribe of Manasseh, so he is an Israelite. He arrived while Joash's son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress so he could hide it from the Midianites. So we see the angel of the Lord, and later on in this passage, you'll see the angel part dropped, and it'll just say the Lord said to him. And actually, later on, Gideon will worship this angel of the Lord, and that might be confusing to us until we understand that this angel of the Lord, it's actually what's known as a theophany. Okay, it's actually Jesus, an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament. So Jesus did appear in the Old Testament several times, and the pre-incarnate Jesus, obviously, and a lot of the times he is called the angel of the Lord. And this angel of the Lord is Jesus, and that's why later on in this passage they'll just call him the Lord. And Gideon will freak out when he realized that he saw the Lord face to face, because the angel of the Lord in this context, I'm not saying in every context, I haven't looked at them all, but in this context, the angel of the Lord is probably Jesus. That's what makes the most sense. So the angel of the Lord, he comes and he sits down at this oak tree, and there's Joash's son Gideon. He's threshing wheat in a wine press so he can hide it from the Midianites. And then it says in verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared and said to him, the Lord is with you, courageous warrior. Now, it's a very kind of funny scene, because the Lord comes to him and says, hey, the Lord's with you, and he calls him courageous warrior. While he's calling him a courageous warrior, Gideon is hiding in a wine press, basically a hole in the ground, threshing wheat to try and hide it from the Midianites. And I've never threshed wheat, so I kind of had to look it up. But let's just say you're not meant to thresh wheat in a hole in the ground. Okay, it's not an easy process. It's actually pretty impossible. So threshing wheat, you're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff, and it's very difficult to do in a hole in the ground. So Gideon is hiding in a hole in the ground, trying to thresh wheat with a stick, probably trying to hide it from the Midianites because he's afraid of them. So he's literally hiding in a hole when the Lord comes to him, looks over into the hole from the tree and says, hey there, courageous warrior, God is with you. And we have to ask, well, is God being sarcastic? Is he kind of poking at Gideon a little bit, making fun of him a little bit? But the answer is that no, God is not being sarcastic. Gideon, it turns out, and we're not going to get to all of it, but Gideon actually is a courageous warrior, becomes a courageous warrior. And God isn't being sarcastic here, although I will say God is sarcastic in the Bible a lot more often than we probably think. But the answer is no, he wasn't being sarcastic. And the point that I want to pull from just these first couple verses is that while all we see often are our limitations, God sees our potential. So while so often all we see are our current limitations, God sees our potential. And if you or I are limited in an area, and we should all know our limitations, that's good, because that's probably where God's going to use you. God likes to use people with limitations because, quite frankly, he gets more glory from it. If God had gone to the strongest, best trained warrior fighter in Israel, the most influential soldier, and then that fighter had gone out and led Israel to victory, where would the glory have gone? Probably to the fighter, to the warrior. But if God chooses what other people consider the most cowardly man, and we're going to see later on, he's from the weakest family and the weakest tribe of Israel to do his will, who gets the glory? So there's that point. I think he's also making another point that our perception of what's important, of important qualities, are often messed up. If you look in Israel's history, they chose Saul to be their king because he was a head taller than everyone else. The people of Israel chose Saul to be their king because he was taller than everybody else, because he looked like a king. That's why they chose Saul. Then God chose David to be his replacement, even though David was the youngest and the weakest among 7 brothers. But how did it turn out? Saul was a failure who died on his own sword, and David was the greatest king that Israel ever had, and was called a man after God's own heart. Because man looks at the outside and God looks at the character. God saw potential in Gideon, even though none of us would have. So our perception of important qualities is often misplaced. All right, going forward in verse 13, Gideon said to him, "Pardon me, pardon me, but if the Lord is with us, why has such disaster overtaken us? Where are all his miraculous deeds our ancestors told us about? They said, 'Did the Lord not bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian." Now, you can imagine just the seemingly arrogance and out of touchness of this question, because the Lord hasn't abandoned them. They've abandoned the Lord, right? They're the ones who started worshiping other gods. And, the Jesus, the angel of the Lord, could have responded to him in a very harsh way. He doesn't. But how many of us are asking that same question today? If the Lord is with us, why has such disaster overtaken us? So the Lord himself turned to him and said, "You have the strength, deliver Israel from the power of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So the Lord doesn't counter him and go, "Wait a minute, I didn't abandon you. You guys abandoned me. You weren't faithful to the covenant that we made. You started worshiping other gods." I didn't, he doesn't say that. Instead, he kind of sidesteps that question, because Gideon is ignoring what he just said, maybe trying to throw him off. And he says, "You have the strength, deliver Israel from the power of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" And he tells Gideon that he has the strength to deliver Israel from their oppressors, from the very people that Gideon is currently hiding in a hole from, right? And then let's look at verse 15. Gideon said to him, "But Lord," you'll notice some parallels between Gideon and Moses, by the way. "But Lord, how can I deliver Israel? Just look, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my family." So look at how Gideon responds, probably a way that similar to how we would respond. He says, "My clan, my family, is the weakest in Manasseh," which is one of the weakest tribes in Israel, one of the smallest tribes in Israel. And then he says, "And I'm the youngest person in my family." So I'm the weakest member of the weakest family of the weakest tribe in Israel. Basically, I'm the least qualified person on earth for this task. And then the Lord says in verse 16, it says, "The Lord said to him, but I will be with you." I'm not going to lie, when I first was going through this lesson, that actually brought me to tears, because just that God says, "I will be with you," and just the way he says it, he says and in that there's this sense of understanding, but I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like when you come up to a parent or something and you feel like you have this fear, or you have this trepidation about something, and that parent goes, it's okay. Like, I understand, it's going to be all right. I'm here with you." And the Lord says to him, "But I will be with you." So Gideon says, "You don't understand. I'm the least qualified person on earth. I am the youngest person in the weakest family in the smallest tribe in Israel." And God says, but you've missed something, because you've forgotten I'm going to be with you. So it doesn't matter that Gideon is the weakest person. It doesn't matter he's the most disqualified person in his own mind, the least qualified person, because God will be with him. And have we ever felt like that? Have we ever wondered how we're going to keep going, how we're going to make it? Have you ever felt like the weakest, least qualified person on earth for your job, or as a parent, or as a wife or a husband? We probably all have at different times. And look at what God does. He goes, means he understands where you're coming from. Means he understands what you're feeling. But I will be with you. And then he says this, continuing 16. says, but I will be with you. You will strike down the whole Midianite army. Not you can, not I think you might be able to, but you will strike down the whole Midianite army. In verses 17 through 21, which we're going to kind of skip over, it's Gideon needing further assurance from God, which God gives him. God's very patient with Gideon throughout all of this. Let's skip on down to verse 22. And it says, when Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, which I don't know who he thought he was talking to, but when he realized it was the angel of the Lord, when he realized it was Jesus, he said, "Oh no, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face," right? Because they knew that if you saw God face to face, you would just pretty much instantly die, or you would be, you would die if you saw God face to face. It says, "Oh no, I've seen the Lord face to face." Then the Lord said to him in verse 23, the Lord said to him, "You are safe. Do not be afraid. You're not going to die." And he asked, why was he safe? Well, one of the reasons I think he was safe is that he sees the face of Jesus. And yes, Jesus is God, but Jesus is also the figure in the Godhead who comes to earth, who takes on human flesh, whose face that we all hope to see one day. And so he is safe. God says that he's safe, even though he's seen the face of the Lord. In verse 24, he says, or in verse 23, he continues to say, "You are safe. Do not be afraid. You're going to die." Gideon built an altar for the Lord there and named it, "The Lord is on friendly terms with me." To this day, it is still there. I don't know if it's still there. It was still there at the writing of this. So then in verse 25, it says, "That night the Lord said to him, take the bull from your father's herd, as well as a second bull, one that is 7 years old. Pull down your father's Baal altar and cut down the nearby Asherah pole." So remember, Gideon asked the Lord why he abandoned him. Well, he looks at his own family, and his own family has altars to Baal and Asherah. Like, you'd think that would be why has our God abandoned us, as they worship other gods? But anyway, so God says, take the second, pull down the Baal altar, cut down the nearby Asherah pole, then build an altar for the Lord your God on top of this stronghold according to the proper pattern. Take the second bull and offer it as a burnt sacrifice, and use the wood from the Asherah pole that you cut down. So he's going to tear down the altar of Baal. He's going to take down the Asherah pole. He's going to build an altar to the Lord on the very site, and he's going to use as fuel for the fire the wood from the Asherah pole. All right. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did just as the Lord had told him. He was too afraid of his father's family and the men of the city to do it in broad daylight, so he waited until nighttime. Gideon's still fearful. So he did it at night because he was too afraid to do it in the daylight. And I want to use this as an opportunity to say the process of faith is not instant. It's not instantaneous. It takes Gideon time to get to the point where he trusts God. It takes time for his faith to grow. It's a gradual process, and God's going to be patient with you and me, hopefully just as he was with Gideon. When the men of the city, verse 28, got up the next morning, they saw the Baal altar pulled down, the nearby Asherah pole cut down, and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. They said to one another, "Who did this?" They investigated the matter thoroughly and concluded that Gideon, son of Joash, had done it. Now, how did they know that Gideon had done it? Well, because people rat on each other, and he took 10 men with him to go do this thing, right? Of his own, servants of his own family. So I'm sure one of the 10 men told them, "Hey, guess what Gideon had us do last night?" So they investigate the matter. They see that it's Gideon. Then the men of the city said to Joash, "Bring out your son so we can execute him." He pulled down the Baal altar and cut down the nearby Asherah pole. But Joash said to all those who confronted him, "Must you fight Baal's battles? Must you rescue him? Whoever takes up his cause will die by morning. If he really is a god, let him fight his own battles. After all, it was his altar that was pulled down." So Joash, we know, is not a perfect man because they were his altars, but by his response, it kind of gives a hint that maybe he did it to kind of go along. Maybe he didn't actually believe in them as gods. And then he stands up for his son. He says, "Do you need to fight Baal's battles? Must you rescue him? If he's really a god, let him fight his own battles." And I kind of want to flip that on its head and say to us, God doesn't need us to fight his battles. You don't have to debate with everyone you run into. A lot of times I see stuff on social media or whatever it is. And you're not, we're not convincing anybody that way. And God doesn't need us to fight his battles. We often do more harm than good when we try. We don't need to defend God. God can handle himself. All we're supposed to do is represent him properly. We're supposed to be representations of who God is. We need to focus on that, not on debating with everybody who believes something different than us, or who's an atheist or something. So that's just the story of Gideon in Judges 6, 11 through 31. And I want us to remember, number one, while we see our limitations, God sees our potential. Number two, what's important to man often isn't important to God. We saw that with Saul and David. Number three, don't ever forget that God is with you, and you can accomplish whatever task he gives you, even if you think you're the most disqualified person, most unqualified person on earth. Therefore, growing in faith is a gradual process. So have patience with yourself and others, more particularly others, have patience with others in their faith process as God has patience. And then number five, let God fight his own battles. Let's focus on doing what he's told us to do and representing him the way we're supposed to. And that's all I got. So we'll bring Jeff back on, let him correct any of my heresy.
No correction. That was awesome. It's a great story. Hey, I got one point that I actually have a couple points, but maybe we can just banter back and forth. So
sure.
Yeah, I thought it was a little comical too when he's called courageous warrior by hiding in the hole. But so the thing that came to mind when you're saying that, and I always try, when I hear people, preach or teach or deliver a sermon, kind of things always kind of pop up. They're kind of weird examples sometimes. It could be silly, but what I thought about this time, what came to mind is when I used to coach soccer.
Okay.
I don't know anything about soccer. The only thing I just knew more than, my 6-year-old son, so, but when you pass the ball, you pass the ball to where you want the person to go, not to the person. Right.
Right.
And so that's what came to mind when you're talking about that. And I wrote down, God calls us to where he sees we're going to be, not where we see that we're currently at. And that's the example that came to mind to me. And I was thinking, okay, that's kind of cool. When he asks us to do something, we have our limitations, but he knows our potential. So he's calling us to where he wants us to go as he passes the ball, if you will, to us. So I don't know if that's spiritual or not, but hey,
that's great.
But I do have a question.
Yes.
So when you're talking about God taking his hand of protection from us, does that happen today? As a believer, we have, the Spirit lives within us. Is that hand of protection removed from us today? What do you think?
Well, I would say, for talking about it from a nation perspective, because sometimes you see that with people, then I'll get to the individual. So people talk about America, and sometimes they'll compare America and Israel. The problem is that Israel was a true theocracy with God at the top, and it was everyone. They were the people of God. In America, we're not run by God. We're not God's people, all of us, in the same sense that Israel was. We are not a holy nation in the same sense that Israel was. And so, when people talk about America, has God removed his hand of protection from America? Well, I don't know if, God has obviously blessed us. I'm not saying that as a country. What I'm saying is that I think it's a false dichotomy when we equate America and Israel, because in Bible times, because we're not the same. Israel had a covenant from God, the whole nation. America doesn't have a covenant from God. We as individuals, as members of a community, there's a community that does. The New Testament community has a covenant from God. So then we can, I think, legitimately ask, can God remove his hand of protection from our community, either individually or as a church? And I think that can definitely happen. I think that in terms of a lot of times what we consider punishments from God is God letting us deal with the consequences of our actions. I think you see that in the Old Testament. I think you see that, in the New Testament. That doesn't mean that he doesn't punish or there aren't those kinds of things. He doesn't discipline. But more often than not, you even as an individual, I've seen in my own life, things happen. Oh, this has happened to me, or whatever it is, or maybe is God, punishing me or whatever. A lot of times it's just, I feel like it's God allowing us to deal with the consequences of our actions.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that. That's probably where I would land on that question myself, is that I think we kind of make our own bed sometimes. We have to figure out how we can, unmake it. And sometimes we just have to walk through whatever the consequence of that circumstance is. Doesn't mean that God can't be glorified through that as well, through that walking of those consequences, right? But yeah, definitely. And then on your other point, I just wrote down, just remember that you're qualified, that we're qualified. If God calls us, we may think we're the weakest of the weak, but God has confidence. Well, what I wrote down was, does God have confidence in us, or should we have confidence in God? I believe we should have confidence in God, right? So,
yeah.
But we can have confidence as we approach the throne of grace also, right? It's like we can, okay, he's asked me to do this. I don't have confidence in my abilities, but I have confidence in his abilities that he's asking me to actually be the hands and feet of. So, which is really another cool thing that he wants to do. So.
Sometimes we raise up, these heroes of the faith, and especially you see in Hebrews chapter 11, and we go, oh, well, I couldn't be Paul, or I couldn't be Moses, or, I couldn't be Gideon. But then you look at these individuals and you go, God chose Moses to go speak to Pharaoh, and Moses had some kind of speech impediment, and didn't, and had all kinds of excuses why he didn't want to go. Gideon saves Israel through God's power, obviously, from their oppressors. And he's, like we said, Paul is, he's an intelligent guy, but he's a persecutor of the church. He's somebody who holds all the robes while they kill Stephen. And God uses him to probably be the greatest missionary that's ever been. So, I think we have this like cognitive dissonance around us where we go, yes, God used all those people, even though that from the outside, they didn't look like they were much, but God can't use me. It's like, of course God can use you. If God can use Gideon and Moses and Paul and Rahab as a prostitute and all these other people, God generally, not that God can't use powerful people. I mean, they all had, abilities as well, but God likes to use the weak. God likes to use the people that maybe don't think that they have the ability. And I agree with you. It's that with God, it's that God can do anything. And if we trust in him, then obviously whatever he wants us to do, he can accomplish. It's just, I think it's difficult sometimes, partially because, it's not just the fact that we have low self-esteem, but some of us probably have low self-esteem, but it's also, I think, a failure to realize that the same spirit that was in Jesus is in us. The same spirit that was in David is in us. And that is where our power comes from, and that's where our strength comes from. And it can be difficult because the Holy Spirit is not a lot of times the Holy Spirit is very subtle, and it's not some kind of overpowering force that controls you. It's a subtle voice that you have to listen to, and that you have to remove distractions from you to actually hear, and all those kind of things. So I don't know why. I've been there too, but we look at all these heroes of the faith in the Bible, and we go, oh my goodness, they were just giants, but they were men and women just like us.
Yeah, and just faithful one day at a time, right? So.
And sometimes kicking and screaming, like that's okay. Some of them, some of them kicked and screamed on the way. That happens.
Absolutely, it's going to happen to us too. And then it was interesting what I wrote down on where Gideon sort of tears down the altars, and he kind of looks at his family and he says, "Oh my gosh, we're like, we've departed." But the cool thing here is, they tear down the altars and then build there. So what I wrote down for me is, kind of build where you're at, tear down. We all have those altars and those idols and those gods in our life. We can call it work, we can call it family, we can call it money, we can call it pride, we can call it whatever we want, right? But Gideon just kind of started where he was at. He realized, he met God, and he said, okay, this is where I'm at. Tear down all the junk and let's just build right. Just build where we're at. And not adding to the junk that we have, right? He tore it down. And but we put God right as kind of an overlay, right? Right on top of it to bury it. So and I appreciated your comment, faith takes time, because we will not be where we want to be overnight. But if we have each night with him, before we know it, we'll be somewhere down the road. But I think it's got, kind of build on the side of our lives where we're at. We all have probably baggage we need to get rid of, right? I say tear it down and build on it this morning. So Just like
I think that's a great point. And you see, God tells Gideon, well, you're gonna free Israel from the Midianites, but he doesn't just immediately go from there and start fighting the Midianites. God gives him this task at his own home, and he says, okay, let's start out kind of small. Let's tear down the Baal altar and the Asherah pole. But before this conversation with God, as Gideon's hiding in that hole in the ground threshing wheat, there's no way he thought that night he was going to be tearing down the altar to Baal and using, it's not just tearing down the altar. It's not just building an altar to God, because they probably would have been okay, worshiping these other gods if you threw up an altar to Yahweh. Mm-hmm. It's tearing down these altars and then using the wood of the Asherah pole as the fire to burn the sacrifice. I mean, that's insult on the injury.
Yeah.
And it's okay. And he's still afraid in it, but he does it. He's faithful. And, God then immediately shows his faithfulness because he has his father step in. And obviously he gives his father those words to say. Obviously it's God who calms down those men from hurting Gideon. So he gives Gideon this small, compared to what he's going to give him later, task, and he immediately shows his faithfulness. And I think that's important for us a lot of times too, is that, God may have large tasks for us to do, but so often he gives us small things. And if we'll just be faithful in those things, he will show his faithfulness, immediately. And Gideon, clearly he's a leader. I mean, he gets 10 guys to go and help him with this. It doesn't matter that they're called as servants. I mean, if they think they're about to get punished or whatever from it, I mean, he obviously has leadership capabilities if he can get 10 guys to go and do this with him, even if one of them might have ratted him out. So, I think that you can kind of take both those things. Like, what in our own lives do we need to tear down? What in our own lives do we have as idols or as whatever that we need to replace with the things of God? And go ahead and do it, like you're saying, and then let's see how God is faithful in all of these different ways when we're faithful in just a little bit.
Absolutely. And then kind of the last thing, the point that I appreciated so much was, God doesn't need us to fight his battles. And sometimes, I want to jump in and, punch that nose of the person that I'm struggling with, it's bad mouthing God or whatever, but he doesn't need us. He doesn't call us to do that. He calls us to be faithful and obedient. And you're absolutely right. And then it kind of flashed back to me when I teached a couple of weeks ago on Ephesians 4, walk in a manner that's worthy in which you've been called. And, he doesn't want us out there, with boxing gloves on, fighting everyone on social media about scripture. He wants us to live it.
Yeah.
So definitely agree with that. So
yeah, there was a guy, a friend of mine who's not a believer, who's actually a pretty unavowed atheist, who was kind of giving it to somebody else who was a Christian and basically saying like, well, you're the reason I'm not a Christian because you believe blah, 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 blah. And, when sometimes that happens, that kind of rises up in you, like, I've got to defend God. And if you want to defend your faith, the best defense for our faith is walking in a manner worthy of the calling that we've been given, like you taught on. That is the best way to convince people that God is real and what he's commanded us to do is the right thing to do, et cetera, et cetera. Getting out, being keyboard warriors and telling people they're going to burn in hell or whatever it is. I don't know what the percentage of success rate on that is, but it's probably less than 1.
Yeah, it's probably pretty low. Now there's a time to, talk about theology, just like we're doing on Tuesday nights, right? And understand, know why we believe and certain things and things like that. And we should all be more educated, and because it also says grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, right? So we need to do that as well. But
but we don't weaponize it. It's not for attacking; it's for illustration.
Yeah. Don't weaponize the word. I like that.
There you go. You got all kinds of little pithy statements.
Yeah. Nice. Good stuff, man.
Great. Oh, I see Jenny was on. Hey, Jenny. I hope your new baby is your whole family's doing well. Well, we've got you're going to see me singing over there, and I've also got the message. So hopefully, if this went well, Jeff, do you think it went well? I mean, if 1 out of 3, that's a pretty good batting average. So
hey, you have you are. I think you probably hit a solid double. You just gapped it. You know, you're sitting on second, man. Bring it home. You'll be fine.
All right. Well, we love you guys, and we will see you. Take 15 minutes, either get up here or take 15 minutes to finish that breakfast, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, and get ready for the service. We'll start at 10.
All right. Love you guys.
Bye.